3, 4, 5.
Go! Uma semana sem HCO e a gente fica já cheio de saudade. Cheio de saudade, né? Meu Deus, como é bom estar aqui!
Já
Boa
estamos ao
noite,
vivo?
gente linda! Estamos ao vivo, cheios de saudade, de vontade de estar junto aqui um pouquinho na rede para falar do que a gente mais gosta nessa vida. Oxe,
Hum.
alguém entrou?
Estou vendo aqui, vamos esperar um pouquinho. O pessoal custa às vezes a achar, né? Na live.
Baixar a live, né, e tudo
Vamos
mais.
ver. Vamos ver
Gente, a
como é
live de
que.
hoje é linda, linda de morrer. Vocês vão adorar.
Esperar um
E a gente
pouquinho.
tem que falar do nosso
Nossa
encontro também, né?
sanguinha. Oi?
Falar do nosso encontro, né? A gente se
Ah,
encontrou finalmente, presencial. Calor, abraço, carinho, coisa boa.
nossa querida Kilma já está conosco. Boa noite, Kilma.
Delícia, gente. Cadê? Deixa eu achar aqui. Vou fazer os compartilhamentos já? E aí.
Perguntar aqui para
Cadê?
Kilma.
Ah, tô aqui, ó.
Recebeu a notificação, Kilma, para entrar? Só posta aqui para a gente saber. O pessoal às vezes não consegue descobrir onde
É
está
só
passando.
folhear também no Facebook, ou entra direto no Divia 10 ou no seu Facebook, um, dois posts para baixo, às vezes estaremos lá. Agora eu fiz isso com o meu pessoal para fazer os compartilhamentos, então eu desci uns quadradinhos aí, estava ali embaixo.
Já a Jane Maria Hoffman está com a gente também. Boa noite. A gente está esperando o pessoal ir entrando, que às vezes demora um pouquinho para achar a live. A gente tem novidades. Provavelmente, para o ano que vem, a gente transmita a partir do YouTube, que é mais fácil de localizar. Também pelo Facebook, porque daí compartilha do YouTube no Facebook, mas gerar a partir do YouTube. Janice Cardoso, a Wagner também está com a gente. Estamos retornando ao HCO hoje, depois de uma semana de pausa, e foi uma coisa muito legal. A gente estava no retiro em Santa Catarina, em Barra de Ibiraquera, com bastante suahá, e eu e a Dívia nos encontramos depois de quase 20 anos, presencialmente. Muita alegria.
Isso. Gente, muita alegria, muito bom, né, Vi? A gente está super próximo aqui, há 3 anos, falando todo dia, né? Para quem não sabe, a gente se fala quase todo dia.
É, há mais de 3 anos.
Mais de 3 anos, né? Matando toda a saudade, todo o gap que ficou, né? A gente está preenchendo agora com novas histórias, com novos encontros nossos, né?
Eu estou com
E
o olho aqui.
encontrar pessoalmente foi muito bonito, foi o que sempre foi da nossa amizade, de estarmos juntos. Só que mais, né?
É, participamos de um
Mais.
retiro muito lindo, né? E a gente gosta muito do Suahá, muito mesmo, e do seu povo. Já combinei com a Divi aqui, agora a gente vai chamar outras flores de Osho que estão por aí, neste lindo jardim. Algumas em forma de botão, outras já floresceram. E assim a gente vai com esse trabalho. A gente está com um monte de entrevista gravada. Eu dei até uma segurada para não acumular muito, porque a gente dá conta mais ou menos de ter um vídeo pronto por mês, né? Com toda a questão de edição de vídeo, colocação de legendas e tal, mesmo contando com o nosso apoio. Vou dar boa noite aqui para o Xamã, que está com a gente também. Gente, esse trabalho tem algumas entrevistas muito lindas, como eu comentei agora, para a gente passar ainda, pelo menos até O meio do ano que vem já tem gravações, então, um pouco mais, inclusive, nesse ritmo. E a gente está com planos de continuar, né, trazendo outras
Ou
flores.
seja, nova temporada vem aí e a gente vai ter a sétima temporada, gente. Olha só que especial. 7 temporadas. A sétima vai estar aí com algumas alterações, a gente vai depois comunicar a vocês, mas tem muita história com o Osho. Não para
É,
mais, gente, não para mais. Puxa um fio, vem um, vem outro, vem uma pérola, vem uns encontros especiais.
as
E a gente
nossas,
vai vivendo essa história, querendo dividir com vocês.
as nossas conexões se estabelecem, né, de uma forma muito bacana. Tem muita gente amorosa, tem muita gente linda no mundo Osho, né?
É,
Então, essas conexões nos enriquecem muito, a gente fica muito feliz de fazer esse programa,
é,
né? E poder compartilhar isso com quem assiste e também estabelecer conexões com essas pessoas no mundo inteiro, que é uma coisa muito bacana,
é,
né? Eu vou dar os recados aqui de sempre. Primeiro, os nossos agradecimentos. Esse trabalho só é possível por conta da nossa equipe que trabalha nos bastidores, nossa equipe de apoio, tudo trabalho voluntário, quase. E, enfim, é muito legal. Então, nossos agradecimentos são Parita, Miguel Fine e Catarina Lira, os bastidores do HcO. E também a, os grupos Osho de Facebook, que também nos apoiam. Nós vamos fazer uma campanha para ter mais aderência de outros grupos Osho de Facebook por aí, que quiserem participar da grande rede HcO de
é
transmissão.
verdade, é
Já
verdade.
temos um contato de já temos um contato de outro grupo que em breve também vai estar sendo compartilhado lá.
Sim,
Já,
sim,
já temos a concordância, mas a pessoa está viajando agora, então assim
tudo
que se
bem.
estabelecer a conexão, teremos também essa transmissão. Então, por enquanto, Osho Sem Fronteiras, Gabriel Sananda, equipe, Nelsânias, A Nova Realidade, Francisco Siqueira, equipe. Nossos agradecimentos muito especiais à nossa pessoas de apoio que nos ajudam com doações. A Dívia põe a chave Pix aqui, é muito importante para nos ajudar a cobrir os custos e possibilitar que a gente continue. Então, nós agradecemos muito a quem já nos ajuda, algumas pessoas que regularmente contribuem, nosso muito obrigado. Eu só não vou falar os nomes porque não sou autorizado a tanto, e eu acho que não é para esse motivo que elas doam genuinamente para a gente. Então, quem puder nos ajudar com qualquer quantia é muito bem-vindo, tá? Então, um recado importante também, nós não somos um canal oficial do Osho, não temos nenhum vínculo com a Fundação Osho Internacional, isso é um trabalho independente de um grupo de amigos que gosta de contar histórias com o Mestre Osho, né? E então também aqui uma coisa muito importante, quando a gente passa, esse trabalho é totalmente voluntário e não é profissional, então às vezes o nosso equipamento não é o melhor e tal, mas a gente faz da melhor maneira que a gente pode. Então, na transmissão, às vezes também por conta do Facebook, do pacote de dados, que a gente procura fazer o melhor possível, mas por instabilidades da internet, a legenda às vezes fica difícil de ler, né? Isso tem
Pixelada.
pixelada fica, isso acontece com alguma frequência, a gente sempre avisa que se tiver acontecendo, a gente, além de pedir desculpas, a gente não é um ato voluntário nosso e nada que a gente conseguiu fazer até hoje para corrigir, mas pode acontecer. Então, saibam que depois o vídeo é editado, querido Miguel, pega o vídeo, edita, põe as legendas de novo, porque a gente tem as legendas configuradas, quando vai assistir o vídeo em privado, está perfeito. Quando vai transmitir, às vezes acontece isso. Então, se por acaso acontecer, ou qualquer travamento, fique por aí, né? E depois no YouTube, a gente, logo depois, nos dias seguintes, a gente publica, estão todas lá. Hoje é de número 131, estão todas lá no YouTube. Canal,
131, gente, olha só. Canal
canal,
Divya 10.
canal Divya 10, vai lá, clica canal Divya 10, vai aparecer o rostinho da Divya ali, e, e lá você vai em playlists, lá tá tudo, em todas as transmissões, desde a primeira, né? E eu acho que é isso, então,
É isso,
de
gente.
novidades.
Você
Ah,
esqueceu de
outra
uma
coisa,
coisa.
lembrei, outra coisa para lembrar.
Melhor que Netflix.
Um comentário aqui, a
Fale.
Padma, Madheva Padma, que foi uma das nossas entrevistadas, que é a autora do Zen, criadora do Zen Tarot, ela criou um novo deck de cartas do tarô magnífico. Ela mostrou uma parte disso
Na nossa
na
entrevista.
nossa entrevista com ela, chama Sacred
Sacred
She,
She.
feminino sagrado, tradução livre, né? Sacred She, feminino sagrado, é lindo demais, né? Então, hoje eu compartilhei no Facebook a,
Ai, gente, eu vou
a
pegar o meu.
publicação da filha dela, da Tica, e então tá lá, gente. Quem quiser entrar em contato, tiver disponibilidade de adquirir, é maravilhoso. Estou louco para conseguir o meu, né?
Ai, os amigos entrando aqui. Tá na hora, gente. A gente vai compartilhar com vocês a beleza da entrevista com o Rashid. A internet não estava boa naquele dia, o vídeo tá craquelado. É o vídeo, tá? Não é a internet.
Sim, sim.
O vídeo tem uns momentos dele que a internet deu umas falhadas e depois continua, mas vale a pena. Vamos ficar também, além da estética, mas ficar com a mensagem, porque é muito legal essa entrevista que a gente fez. Eu tenho certeza que vocês vão adorar. Ele
É,
está com, a gente supõe mais ou menos que ele esteja já com uns 87, é isso?
87 anos, né? E o
Pelas
cara,
contas
assim,
que a gente fez, né?
é, ele teve com o Osho desde o princípio lá em Puna 1. É um cara que cumpriu muitas funções, é um grande artista, né?
Sim.
E ele trabalha com projetos ecológicos também, inclusive aqui no Brasil, em Alto Paraíso, ele passou uma época e tem assim uma visão muito particular e muito profunda sobre tudo que ele viveu. Essa entrevista nos comove cada vez que a gente assiste, enfim, aqui fazendo edição e tal. Então a gente espera que vocês gostem tanto quanto a gente gostou, né, de fazê-lo. Vamos lá?
Bora. Até já, gente. Qualquer
Até
coisa
já.
a gente aparece aqui e no final fica para a gente dar um beijinho de tchau. Tá bom? Até já.
Okay, Rashid, welcome to our program, Histórias com Osho, Stories with Osho.
So, how did Osho come into your life? And what happens next?
It's a long story. I could take a whole
Yes.
hour just telling the story.
Yes.
But basically, I'm an artist painter.
Mhm.
And at a certain stage, I left London, where I was teaching and working, and bought a farm, and a little self-sufficient farm, just to take care of my own needs, basic food and everything. And it was paradise, except something was missing. You know, I had a lovely wife, a lovely kids. I loved the work I was doing, because sometimes I used to go and teach art as therapy. So everything was wonderful, but there was something missing, and I didn't know what it was until one day I was on my way to work. I was driving. It was midwinter. There was snow this deep, and the roads were really bad. And I thought, I can't go to work. So I stopped at a little roadside telephone booth. They used to have telephones in those days. And I was calling up my work to say I can't come. And I looked up, and there was this big yellow Shell petrol tanker coming sideways down the road towards me. He was sliding in the snow, and he hit the phone box like that. There was broken glass. And in that moment, I saw him, I saw the horror on his face, and I felt, I haven't lived. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing here. Anyway, he jumped down. He said, "Are you okay?" He shook my hand. I said, "Yes, I'm fine." But I knew everything had changed. My life was changed. I didn't know how. I didn't know what. I drove home very carefully. And then the next thing that happened was, it was Christmas time, and my son was at a little school where they had a Christmas carol service. It's like a English ritual. I don't know if they do it in Brazil, but every Christmas, and they sing certain songs for Jesus, welcoming Jesus. And I went to that, and it was an ancient church. Like, the church was probably more than 1,000 years old. And it had the feeling of a place where people had come to worship, to meet whatever, the divine God, whatever. And when I heard the children's voices singing and like silver going up into the rafters, I just started crying. I'm nearly crying now, actually. And I realized that it was something to do with the Christianity I'd rejected long before. I was about 35. And we had a sort of conversation with the vicar, the priest, and sort of something was happening for a little while. But after a few months, it was clear. My wife and I both thought, yeah, no, this isn't it. And actually what brought an end to it was the priest and the head of the church, the local church, came and said, "We hear you were swimming in the river on the Lord's Day." And it was true. In the summer, we'd been swimming in the river, beautiful, clear river. And they were coming to judge me for taking my children to swim in the river on a Sunday. And in it, we argued, and I quoting the Bible and quoting this and that. And in the end, I just said, fuck off. That's the end of it. And that very weekend, we got a book came from Osho. £1,000 arrived from somewhere for some paintings we'd sold. My wife was a tattoo, and we both sold some paintings, and we got the money. A holiday we had arranged got cancelled, and what was the other thing? Oh, a friend said, "I need somewhere to live. Can I come and stay with you for a bit?" And he could look after the farm. Within 3 weeks, we were in India. And it was just that I just want to say about the book that came. I was in the early morning milking the cow in the cow type. And my wife came in, and she got this book. Actually, it's this one up here. That one.
I wanna see.
My way, the way of the white cloud.
Wow.
And she read one paragraph, and we're both in tears. We went inside to my friend, who's an actor and painter, and we read him the paragraph, and he's in tears. And it was just Osho talking about relationships, about the use of our time while we're in this body, about not getting bogged down in the small things. And this was exactly what I was wanting to hear. So within 3 weeks, we were in Pune. So basically, that's my story of how I met Osho.
What year was it?
This was in 1977.
77.
And yeah, and I was exactly 40 years old. I was 40 years old.
And how was to meet Osho?
Well, it was extraordinary because in a way we were that generation who'd seen that all the past, that Victorian leftover, the 1900s, 20s, I grew up during the war, the World War. So we saw that that wasn't the way. Yeah, so we had been looking for community, and it was difficult to find people who could commit. So suddenly walking through the ashram gate, the gateless gate, and it's like you're going from monochrome to technicolor. You're going from gray to vitality, to life. There were just people who looked so beautiful, like you guys actually look so beautiful. And everyone had long hair, long beards, men, women, kids. Everyone walked so relaxed. And, like they're carrying a big bulk of wood on their shoulder, or a ladder, or a baby, or a clipboard. They just moved with such ease. It's like I'd never seen that. I'd never seen such beauty. And the greenery after that dirt and dust and squalor and heat of India coming up in the taxi from Bombay. Suddenly you're in this greenery of the trees and lush vegetation and the orange of 1,000 people, actually less, 500 in those days. It was mind-blowing. And it was, for me, it was absolutely clear immediately, if he can create this energy, I'm with him. It's what I want. We got a farm there, we got children, relatives. I'd got 2 daughters from a previous marriage, but somehow this was it with Osho. And we took sannyas on the 2nd or 3rd day there. 3rd day, I think it was. And he gave me and my wife the same name, actually, Rashid and Rashida. Years later, she dropped out, actually. It was not her thing, although she thought it was for a long time. But anyway, yeah, and and it's been very clear for me that he was the guide who pointed me at myself, who pointed the direction, which is not out there, it's in here. That's what I needed to hear. That's what we all need to hear, actually.
And what's the meaning of your name?
Ah, lovely. It's 99 names of God in the Muslim faith. And the 98th name is Rashid, and it means unerring, without error. So my name, Deva, the divine is without error. The divine is always right. And when I say little Rashid is in the way, then it all goes wrong. So so it's a very good lesson in the opposite of what our culture teaches us. Like, you have to do it, you have to go for it. He just stood it all on his head. And then when he's giving me sannyas, when he's talking about it, he says, don't just do something, sit there, which is exactly the opposite of what my father was always telling me. Don't just sit there, do something.
Cool.
That says a lot about Osho.
Jokes of Osho.
Yeah, madman.
And did you stay in Pune?
I knew once we had 2 clear months, which was January and February of the next year, and we had to be back for this farm. I needed to be back for the lambing, for the sheep to have their lambs. I needed to be there for that. So we said, let's go back, let's sell the farm and come and live here. And that's what we did. And then I stayed with him all the way from Pune 1 till the ranch, Pune 2 until he left the body. And when he left the body, I left. That's why. And then I went to Brazil, actually, in 92. 92, I went to Brazil, Alto Paraíso.
Alto Paraíso, yes. But before that, tell us a little about your life in Pune 1, Rajneeshpuram, and Pune 2.
Yeah. What was so interesting was we're living in a community with no rules, no locks, no police. You know, you're not being told what to do or how to live, except according to your awareness, your consciousness. And how is it that 1,000 people, later 5,000, later 10,000 people can live without locks, without police, without rules, without money? It was miraculous. And how does that happen? It's because Osho was there as, well, in a way, he's a signpost. He's just pointing along the way. So we are already where we need to be, but we didn't know that. So we had to go out and have all these adventures and come back and learn all these lessons. So for me, it was just wonderful being in a community without rules, and yet there were clear structures. You know, you were in this department. I was in, for example, I started off in the weaving. I'd never done weaving. It was right next door to the school when my kids, my two boys, were at school. So I could always be there. I did sometimes taught painting there in the school occasionally. And then at a certain stage, Mukta, Greek Mukta, you may have heard about, money up to buy the property in Corrigan Park. She came searching me one day and she said, "I hear you're a farmer." And she was in charge of all the gardens. And I said, "Yeah, I had a farm." And she said, "Well, we're growing vegetables and nothing ever comes of it. Like we need some expertise with growing vegetables." And that was, I've been growing vegetables all my life, so I was really happy. So that was extraordinary to be working for Mukta as a boss, because she was just loving and very clear and straight. If she didn't like something, she'd say it. She'd put it very clear. And so for me, that was the big work, to find ways of making growing organic vegetables for the master, you know, that had the most important person on the planet. I'm growing vegetables for him. And it just put an enormous energy, like we were rocket fired to do what we could to get out of this absolutely barren soil. It was a volcanic, laterite, compressed, compacted soil. How to make that into a beautiful ground for growth of vegetables. And it took us 3 or 4 years. I mean, it took us all our energy, shipping in truckloads of horse manure from the racing stables, putting up shelters to stop against the worst of the summer heat and the worst of the monsoon rains, devising, having to be very imaginative. And also at the same time, there were pioneers in the field of agriculture, like it was just the beginning of permaculture. Permaculture is an Australian, South American system of growing vegetables organically along there. Yeah. And there was a Japanese guy who'd written The One Straw Revolution about the use of growing organically, growing vegetables organically. I can't remember his name, but a beautiful book, The One Straw Revolution. So there was stuff going on around the world that was to do with this new recognition of the needs of the earth that are actually contrary to the needs provided by the big pharmaceutical companies. So that was beautiful, and having the responsibility of the garden, and there were, in the end, we had about 15 or 20 vegetable gardeners, and it was my responsibility to working productively, and being answerable, first of all, to Mukta, then to Vivek, Nirvana, and then finally to Osho, and to his cooks too. And I just want to say one thing that was extraordinary and unique, and I've never experienced in any other thing. Every day, I would collect the vegetables in the afternoon for his evening meal and for the next morning's meal. And then I would take these baskets of food, fresh vegetables, salads, and I'd go into Lao Tzu house and go in through an entrance around the back, near the, and then you walk down a long corridor to the kitchen, and the corridor is lined with his books, because his library had overflowed this long corridor, books, and it was like walking through water, underwater. The air was the silence was thick. You know, you could actually touch the silence. I just want to share that experience. How did it happen? But it's part of the sort of miracle of being with an enlightened master, that there are things that are inexplicable, so we call them miracles. And I don't really believe in all those walking on water, turning water into wine. I think they're metaphors. But for me, it was an actuality, the feeling of fluidity in the viscous. It was viscous. Okay. And then another thing that was extraordinary was, went back to England after the first 2 months, did the lambing season, and 3 months later we were back, having sold everything. And he gave me a welcome in Darshan, and he said, just to come forward. He put his hand on my, up at the top here, and on my third eye. Then afterwards we were walking, and then we met some friends on the road. We were going back to Prem's restaurant where we lived in the garden, and we met a friend actually, and he said, how's it going? And I said, I should put my hand on my head, and then suddenly I could feel something here, like a hairdryer. What I'm wanting to describe without moving my hands is how, when a friend met me, I put my hand on my head and could feel a sort of gust of wind or air or heat or energy. And I said to my friend, put your hand there, without telling him what to expect. And he put his hand there and he whipped his hand away. He said, wow, what's that? And then other people who were passing and friends came, and everyone could feel this column of like air coming up from this top of my head. So, and that's, I don't do miracles. I don't really believe in miracles, but there are things that happen with a master that are inexplicable, that cannot be explained. So I just want to mention that. Okay.
Touch of Osho remains, né? Remains in your head.
Yeah. When we shipped off to America, I was one of the first ones there because of, it was a huge bit of land and they wanted my agricultural skills, such as they were. And in a way, that was another dream, a dream come true. I can't remember how many thousands of acres, 60,000 acres, hectares, this huge bit of land. And we could manage it ecologically. And I've always been an organic gardener. I've never used chemicals in my life. And so this was a sort of dream. This would be an unpolluted, uncontaminated atmosphere. So there I was, early days, and gradually, first of all, there was 10 of us, and then there was 50, and then there's 150, and then there's 500. And that was happening very quickly over about four months or something. So by the time Osho arrived, which was, I think, October, we got a fair bit of things happening. We got fruit trees planted. We got lawns put down for his house. We've got fields cleared of rocks for planting. We'd started on the first of the water, conserving the little stream that was almost dried up, and starting with check dams, little dams, so that water would build up into pools, and then gradually the water table would arise. All we could do to make things more habitable. But I was always having trouble with Sheila, actually, because, you know, she said, we want 1,000 chickens. Okay, yeah, let's get 1,000 chickens. And I said, and the thing is, we've got all these little encampments of houses, a house a kilometre away, kilometre. So we have the chickens spread around, so then they'll be healthier and happier. And she said, no, put them all together. I said, well, they tend to get diseases if you have too many chickens concentrated. And she said, give them antibiotics. See, so that was like one of many arguments I had with Sheila. In the end, she kicked me out of the farming. And farming is one of my loves. And I ended up in the pot room, washing pots for plates and stuff. And it was like my dream being broken. Also, I have to say this, my partner came belatedly because she hadn't any of the skills that were needed. She wasn't a builder, she wasn't a farmer. And she was now involved with another guy, and so I had that heartbreak of, my kid. And, you know, that was my low point of sannyas, when my lover had left me, my job had left me, I was without meaning. And by this time, Osho had started doing drive-by, and he'd come by, Rolls-Royce, driving, smiling. He never looked at me. He never looked at me for 9 months or something, a long time. And then one day I realized, you know, I could go on like this in misery, or I could celebrate. And he had taught us, he'd told us that even misery can be celebrated. Yeah, and somehow that started. And that very day, he stopped the car and he danced with me, you know, like, I don't understand these things. So from then on, yeah, I realized, yeah, I think the realization was that I'm responsible for myself. He's not going to make me enlightened. And so I started celebrating everything, and immediately I got moved out of the pot room into construction, which I love. You know, carpentry I do a lot of anyway. And that went on and on and on. And I remember seeing that a lot of people were very upset with the way things were going with Sheila, her dictatorial, sort of fascist way of reading this. But I felt okay. You know, I even wondered why I wasn't feeling all unhappy and miserable about that. And actually, funnily enough, I was having dinner with Manisha and Devaraj and the guy who did the Shanti Badras, who was one of the poisoners, her husband, Riten. That night, we just decided to have dinner together for some reason. The night that it came out that Sheila had left. And suddenly hearing all these stories of what had happened, it was so shocking. You know, like it was so that it had been happening under our noses. People being poisoned in the dals, people being poisoned in the ashram. Amrita, Dr. Devaraj himself being poisoned. You know, we didn't know any of this, and suddenly all these stories are coming out because he knew a lot more than I did, of course. Yeah, so that was very, very difficult. And I remember when it all closed down, I went to stay in Spain. I went to live with a friend in Spain. And I just remember the trauma of that dream being smashed, really, by the polished boot of the American government, the American system, which was clearly threatened by a man who's, like, here's 10,000 people living without money, without laws, without rules, policemen, without any fights, without any crime. We got to get rid of these guys.
So the ranch was finished, and
Yeah.
and you went to Spain during the world tour, yes?
Yes, yeah. And it looked like at one stage that Osho was going to come to Madrid. And so I went to Madrid with this friend and another couple of friends, Spanish. And we were on standby to help whatever help was needed. But in fact, in the end, you all know, he decided to go back to. And what's got clear, have you read Neelam's book?
I've just got it. Just started reading.
It's a
And
beautiful book. It's a beautiful
yes,
book, and it's stories that we didn't know. We didn't know. It's got the inside stories about why and how, what was going on with Osho. So I've just received it too, and I'm loving it. It's one of those really good books, like Shunyo's book and Jyoti's book. They're really strong for me. They're really beautiful. Okay, where was I? Oh yes, I just want to say that first 2 months after the ranch ended was pretty traumatic, in the sense that so much that we had trusted in and believed and hoped and worked for was suddenly, and it was done maliciously by the Reagan administration. And just my dreams at that time were of being on the run in a big, huge landscape with the enemy, with an army out looking for us, or police or helicopters, and having to hide. I mean, that's how deep it went. And feeling a victim, yeah. So anyway, that couple of months, and then I come out of that, and da-da-da-da. And then when Osho went to Crete, that was a beautiful little episode. Beautiful. It was like a little diamond. There were very few people there. Well, to begin with, 50 or so. So you're very close sitting with him. And he's so relaxed and he's so naughty, like winding up the bishop and winding up the Greek philosophy on which our whole culture is based. And then again, so this time when it happened, that the police came and bust open and stuff, I felt absolutely, in my energy, in my power. And I was driving Mukta's car, immediately following on the police and driving into the police station in the docks, and felt, outraged, and could say, whenever I could see someone to say it to, that this isn't right, da 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 da. And then we were singing, a lot of us, and more people coming. And then there's 100, 200 people outside the police station singing, beautiful Osho songs. I love that. The celebrating everything, celebrating misery, celebrating disaster. Yeah. And then I came back by car. We drove back, my Spanish friend and I, and we stopped at that new therapy place that was being run by Tirtha, and Devraj, the doctor, was there, and the dentist. And, it's like they were keeping up the therapy. But then after 2 or 3 days there, we're just passing through on the way back to Spain, we suddenly realized that actually he's not with Osho anymore. He's not saying it really, but he's saying, well, he put his hand on my knee at one stage, Tirtha, and said, well, I think you'll understand that we now need to get together and hang together and forge our own path. No, that wasn't like that for me. I'm with him.
Was
And,
it Tirtha? Tirtha?
yes, Tirtha, yeah. I just felt a shock that it felt like betrayal, actually. Yeah, it felt like betrayal. I mean, okay, fine, he did his thing, but at that time, I had judgment and I felt shocked. And yeah, now, I mean, there were always people coming and going, always people. You know, that was one of the things Osho used to do was, you know, it's like he's driving along this road, Christianity, and now he's going Buddhism, and now he's going Taoism, and now he's going Zen. And each time he takes a turning, he loses half the population because they were there because they were Zen and Buddhists, or because they were Christians, or because they had these values. And he's all the time breaking our values, breaking our adherence to beliefs. That's right. He's breaking our adherence to beliefs. So actually, in the end, I got used to all that sort of thing. But with Tirtha, it seemed he was such a, you know, he was setting himself up as the first disciple, you know, like the inheritor of that role. But yeah, Osho said very clearly there was going to be no one inheriting his role. Yeah, that we're all free to work our own with his guidance. Yeah, that's why I say he's a signpost. Yeah. And there's so much he has said, which over 45 years, since I've been a sannyas 45 years, and I'm still learning things from him. There's still stuff I have to see and understand.
And then you went to India, back to India, right?
Yeah. And then I worked in Lao Tzu Garden as his bodyguard. And that was very beautiful. There's a guy called, I can't remember his name, but he was in charge of the guards for a while. And he was a beautiful man and a martial artist. And he always walked like he's on the stage, on the martial arts. And actually, he's now enlightened and teaching in Brazil.
Is it Vasant?
Vasant.
Vasant.
Yes.
Beautiful man. Yeah.
Yes, we interviewed him already twice.
Oh, good. He's lovely.
He's beautiful, really beautiful guy.
Yeah.
He is here in Brazil.
Yes. In fact, I sent one of my grandson, is also a martial artist and very beautiful, and a seeker. I just thought, well, yeah, they'd get. Yes, so then I shared running the guards with a couple of other guys. One of them lives about 50 kilometers from here, and we see each other often. Beautiful man. He was also later the photographer for Osho, called Prem Geet. And he's with Sandhya, who used to work in the sewing room with Veena and Gayan, sewing clothes for Osho. And the other guy died, actually, but we were very close. Somehow it was a terrific bonding, being the three of us responsible for Osho's security. And it meant we sat in the front row one night, every third night. And sitting in the front row was this amazing experience. You know, I talked about the viscous air in Osho's house. It was thinner in the Buddha hall during discourse, but it was there. You could feel it in the front row, and I never felt it in the other rows. And maybe it's also to do with his the slight smell of eucalyptus that he had, Osho had the scent of. I've got a story about guarding. Was one day, it was decided his health was getting bad, so they were going to build him a swimming pool. So they dug out this big hole. And then one day, Anando came to me. She was looking after him at that time. And she said, "Oh, Osho, I'll bring Osho out in a few minutes to look at the pool." So I stood there by the gate, and then there was a little hedge and a gap in the hedge, and he was going to walk through the gap to look at the pool, look at the big hole in the ground. And then I suddenly saw there was a huge puddle, and he had these white, pristine socks on and these beautiful black chapels. And too late, this is I've ever regretted. I'll go to my grave regretting this, that I didn't take my cloak off and throw it on the ground for him to walk on. But I missed. Yeah. So gardening was beautiful. And then I did that for a year, sitting outside his room, outside his window. And sometimes you're absolutely bathed in the moonlight. And his clarity is like the moonlight coming through the trees, coming through the window. You're just sitting there. That's your job. It's just to sit there outside and listen and watch. Yeah, and then from then on, I did various jobs. I worked, in fact, at the whole ashram, guarding, in charge of the guards of the whole ashram. And that was just, I mean, it was easy. It was like quite routine, really. I just had to make sure people had passes and things. There was very, very rarely was there any disturbance or anything that was untoward. Oh, I want to tell you a story. Will you excuse me a minute? When we first got to Pune too, we didn't have all the equipment. There's only 50 of us or so. We didn't have all the sound technicians, the video technicians. So we were just recording an ordinary old tape recorder, Osho talking, the discourses. This would have been in January, because he came in the beginning of January. And he was giving discourses on whatever, Kahil Gibran, or no, before that. And one of my jobs was to make notes of what he's talking about. So I had a clipboard, and he's talking about Buddha walking through the forest. And then he goes on with the story, and then he changes to another story about the importance of education in Indian schools. And then he changes to what happened on the ranch. And then, so all the subjects he's talking about, you're making notes. And when he was away on a subject, I started drawing him. And I thought, and I do very quick sketches. And I knew it was sort of a bit naughty, but I mean, yeah, he's long story, a good 10 minutes. He's talking about Buddha. But then sometimes suddenly he changed. I just started a drawing and he's suddenly changing, or he's changing too quickly. And I'm making all the notes. But it was wonderful. I did some amazing drawings and I mounted them in a little sketchbook and I gave them to Neelam. And I said, I would like you to present those to Osho, and I feel that if they want to be used in publications or books or something, there's no copyright on them. So she said, okay, I'll take them in. And she took them in, and 3 days later she came back and she called me into the office and she said, Rashid, Osho says 3 things. 1, if you're taking notes, you take notes. 2, there was a very good artist who worked for us in Pune 1. What was his name? And he was a friend of mine called Vishwasa. And he was a very clever artist, very good at portraits and things like that. And 3, these drawings are not to be used for publications. Okay, good little hit for the ego. So I got this book down because I just wrote recently, last year, a little book called A Master for Life. And it contains some of the drawings
Aha! Oh,
with little verses like, I'll just read you one verse. I sit in silence twice a day because 40 years ago you said to. Now I see why. Osho. They're all little 3 lines ending in Osho. And the next one is, in all the garden greenery, a single crimson rose leans towards the sun, like I lean to you, Osho. And so there's no, he didn't like them. He didn't want them to be published. Some of them are a bit crazy. I'll show you really crazy.
How can we get this book?
I just printed 100 copies and gave them to friends. So, but yeah, there are no more, I'm afraid. But maybe I should get it photocopied or something. Yeah. Anyway, it was a one-off. It was because I wasn't painting at the time, so these little verses were coming to me. I didn't sort of think, and I just started writing them down. And then it wasn't till later that I put the drawings and the thing together. Yeah.
How did Osho influenced your work with art?
I'm finding that really difficult to answer. The first thing was that when I first started painting after he left the body and I'm back, I felt much freer. I felt freer. I wasn't worrying about what it looked like or what people would think or what I should be doing or if it was in line with any tradition or something. I just felt freer, but not very free. I have to say that now I do feel absolutely free. But this is because it's 40 years since he died, isn't it? No, it's 20. How long since he died? 90. So 33 years since he left the body.
33. Yeah.
So well, it's taken me 33 years to get free. Really, I feel now whatever I do is coming from that place of no mind, that place. He was very clear that there's objective art and there's subjective art. Subjective art is what we see everywhere. Objective art is the art that comes from no mind, that comes from emptiness. And of course, all the great artists, the Michelangelos and Cézanne and Matisse, they combine both. They know that moment when they're no longer painting. It's just the brush is doing the work. The elbow is doing the work. So he was following Gurdjieff, and actually even recently I heard Eckhart Tolle say the same thing, the objective art and the subjective art. And it feels to me now that what's coming is objective. And I can't show you anything, but none of it's up on my website at the moment, but it will be because people are trying to get things together for the big exhibition and publication and stuff. So that's about to happen. But anyway, yes, his influence on my art is total because his influence on my life is total. I've become human. I've become more human. The expression of consciousness that I'm longing to be and this world needs. I'm moving into that field. So yes, that's my answer to that question.
Could you tell us a little about your eco-environmental projects?
Right. One of the things I was asked to do towards the end, there was a bit of wasteland way out the back of the ashram. And it was a barren piece of land with a few thorn bushes, a few termite mounds, a few scraggly trees that were always having their branches cut, and so they were never healthy. And I got given the project to bring it back to life. And so the first thing we did was a lot of research. like how to clean water. There was this sewer running through it. How we designed and built pools that are entirely cleaned by plants. Different plants can clean water. Drills to stop the plastic and the big stuff coming down. And then working out which of the trees were native, having different flowering times so that there would always be something amazing, beautiful happening. Which were the endemic species that would attract the local species, which were all in decline. Like when I first went to Pune 1, there were monkeys everywhere. In Pune 2, we never saw monkeys, or rarely saw them. You used to see great flocks of fruit bats flying over every night. I mean, millions, probably millions of them. And then towards the end, you just see, lucky if you see 100 in a night. So what that was my love and my job, was to find ways of bringing that back to life, and to do it in an environmentally friendly way. Actually, Osho left the body before the work really started, so I just left a huge lot of research and plans. But that came in very helpful, because later we had a similar sort of issue in Brazil, like how to make that bit of the Cerrado more fertile, more giving. Because my understanding was in the old days, when before us Europeans came to Brazil, the Cerrado was not much lived in. They passed through it, but didn't live there, the native Indians. And so anyway, so that was sort of thing. And then the same again, I've done it in a number of places, a number of times, but what I learned really, I mean, it's a whole long learning curve, starting with my little farm, with a garden as a child, actually. Just recently, I was in the house where I grew up in the war, and I saw the garden, and I realized that that's how I survived, by nature. Nature gave me what it was needed in the sort of shocks and traumas and disasters and horrors of the war. Somehow my little garden, growing little carrots and things, had given me something which is still with me. I'm still growing my own vegetables. Osho Lila, they had a nice project, about 8 or 10 acres, to make that. It was just fields from sort of agribusiness, the same grass, no flowers. We did a huge job planting trees, flower shrubs, making waterways, and making it. That was the thing, to make it where humans and nature could be in harmony together. So it's not humans taking over, nature taking over. It's a place of harmony. That was been a joy in my life. Yeah.
How do you see Osho's legacy today?
I think it's absolutely critical to human survival, that his legacy is giving humanity and humanity all they need to survive as a species. We're headed towards extinction. I mean, the way the corporate world is, and the government, I don't know if it'll get to that, but it seems to me Osho has given us the tools to survive and thrive. So for me, that his legacy is a paramount tool for human survival. I don't see much of it. For example, in England, I go into the biggest bookshop in London, in the area where a lot of intellectuals and creative people are, like a sort of upmarket part of London. And there's not one Osho book there. And for me, that's such a shame. But yeah, and I'm seeing more and more of him on YouTube. And that's great. That's great.
Mhm.
I think his legacy is the single most crucial ingredient for humanity's survival. And actually, to put it down into even shorter sentence, he's showing us the value of meditation, of disengagement. There's all sorts of interesting, wonderful stuff happening in science and physics and psychology and stuff. And just listening to a guy who's talking about the two hemispheres of the brain, how we're living in a left hemisphere, right, logical, separating world, as opposed to the right, which is comprehensive, connecting, engaging, holistic. And Osho's giving us the tools of meditation, which is to balance both the hemispheres, it seems to me. I don't know. What do I know?
I think we are coming to an end, but
Yes, my goodness.
Just before that, we always ask last question. It's not really a question. We want to hear you say, if you could say one word for Osho, what would that be?
Love.
Love.
It just came out. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, and that, I'd say that as a benefit of meditation.
Yes.
Because when the mind is gone, there's only love. That's why those kids, you know, all kids are so easy to love and so full of love, because they haven't got their busy minds. And that's what Osho's given us. Yeah, love. And then if you love, then you don't destroy the habitat. Simple. Love. Love.
Okay.
I love you guys. And I love you guys for doing what you're doing. I'm so grateful.
Thank you.
We are also so grateful for all our guests, and we are very happy to do that. It's just a little way to give a little work.
Really testimonials, really, really stories.
Living books.
Living books,
Beautiful.
living chapters.
Yes.
Yes, I'm going to write that.
Okay, thank you so much, Rashid.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
If you have anyone that you think would like to talk to us, please suggest us. We are open to that, okay?
I will. Yeah, lovely. Okay. Bye.
So, namaste. Osho!
Osho!
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye. Bom, pessoal,
Sem palavras, sem palavras. E é por isso que
entrevista linda.
faz isso, né?
Oi?
É por isso que a gente faz o que faz, né?
Eu queria dar um recado, primeiro agradecer as pessoas que ficaram até agora com a gente e também dizer que a gente tem entrevistas muito lindas gravadas e outras por vir. Então, se você acha que isso pode, você que está nos assistindo, isso pode ter alguém que você possa sugerir de ver também. Compartilhe se você acha que mais pessoas poderiam ter interesse nisso. Compartilhe também, porque tem alguns depoimentos muito tocantes, né? Muita
Lattes.
coisa, assim como essa de hoje. Inclusive, a Vissajana, que está aqui com a gente, comentou sobre ele, e a impressão do Rashid, cada vez que ele falava, parecia que os olhos dele estavam vendo a vida com a visão de um artista, e é assim que ele descreve tudo, cada
É,
coisa, cada significado muito diferente. Eu vou sugerir para bastante gente essa entrevista porque ela merece realmente ser vista. Pessoal, a gente tem mais semana que vem.
mais. Para os roxos. Tchau, Sanguinha! Beijos. Até semana que vem. Como é que desliga aqui? Pera, agora foi. Beijo, gente. Tchau.